Good morning. We will go ahead and call the August 5th, 2021 MAPS for Citizens Advisory Board meeting to order. Oh, I'm so sorry. The September 2nd, I was reading the minutes, so sorry. The September, I don't know what month it is. Is it May? The September 2nd, 2021 MAPS for Citizens Advisory Board meeting to order. Our first order of business are our minutes, but I think we have some changes to make to those minutes. So I believe if you can turn your attention to the minutes of August 5th, we list that Harry Black, Bob Nealon, and Kevin Guinera are absent, and they were present. But I do think that absent were Shay Morris and Allie Shin. Is that correct? Okay. And then I saw one additional small change down on the next to the last paragraph on page 3. The second to the last sentence currently reads, "She commented are in crisis," and I think it was supposed to be something like, "She commented our youth are in crisis." I didn't see any other changes. Did anybody else see any changes? Yes, ma'am.
I was reading the minutes and I saw the name in that same paragraph, Tina Belchick. I wasn't clear on who that was.
Okay, I think that's great. Tina Belchick is the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club of Oklahoma County.
Okay, and it could just be I did not remember that. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other modifications to the minutes? Okay, so with those modifications, I'd take a motion to approve the minutes. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so our next order of business is the Revenue and Expenditure Report. Mr. Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have in your packet the Revenue and Expenditure Report for the period ending 7/31/2021 in its usual form. Real quickly on the revenue side, for the month, total $10,905,878, and total program of $136,824,251, and that puts us at only 2.9% below projected collections right now. So we're gaining on that steadily. And then expenditures for the month, $139,111 for a total of $1,030,000. Then you also see the breakout on the expenditures. Now I'll try to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay. Any questions about the Revenue and Expenditure Report? Okay. If not, I'd take a motion to accept the report as presented. Anybody want to make a motion in a second? Okay, there we go. Please cast your vote. Great, thank you so much. All righty, now moving on to item 4. A, the recommended approval of the MAPS 4 implementation plan. I think, Jason, you're going to present to us today. And thank you for being here again.
I wasn't expecting a round of applause, but thank you, I appreciate it. It's good to see you. Well, you'll really be excited. The presentation is brief this morning, so if you do nod off, it could always be worse. We could be debating a mask mandate, so thankfully we're not going to do that today either. So it's great to see everybody this morning. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to come back. So we've done a lot of work in the last month, and I think that's really where we're going to start our presentation this morning. Is just really just a bit of a recap on what's happened since our last board meeting. As we discussed at the workshops last month, we have done, ADG and our team, everybody involved really, we've done a ton of work on this implementation plan. And you know, I think last month when we brought it to the board, obviously we were hoping for recommendation, but I think that as we, you know, finished the presentation last month, I think, as I mentioned to several of you, this plan went from becoming ADG's plan to becoming our collective plan. And, you know, I think naturally that, I think if you're a board member, that stimulates some sense of ownership and responsibility. And so it's only natural that you would have questions and want to make sure you understand what you're voting on. And so completely respect the fact that you guys wanted some more information, and we love the opportunity to sit down with you guys in the last month. So really just to really go back to what's gone on in the last month, we have had several, they were referred to as workshops in the August meeting, but I think since that time we've referred to them as briefings. And so we've had several briefings with one or more of you. I think we did a total of 5 meetings, the last one being just a couple of days ago. We had some folks that were out of town, and so we did some virtual meetings. And I would say, you know, if I were to characterize the meetings, I would say in general they were all really positive. We had, I think more than anything else, it gave us a chance to have a little bit of a conversation. ADG spent a lot of time, I think, over the past several months, you know, giving the board a lot of information. I mean, it's $1 billion, it's 16 projects. Each one of the projects has projects within itself. And so, you know, I think we felt this responsibility, this professional responsibility to give everybody as much context as we could. And so you guys have lived through that with us, and you have been given a lot of information, and it took us a long time to get through it. So the workshops, I think, were great, though, because it gave us a chance to sit down and have a conversation. You know, Allie in particular, I think even before the board meeting, you know, commented like, I've got all this information, but I need to understand the why. And I think that's a really good comment that she made. And I really think that that's what these workshops, these briefings were about, is giving you the why. And so we, you know, I feel like as I look back on those, it gave us a lot of time to just have an open dialogue. It gave the board time, I think, to ask questions. It gave us time to answer those questions. And so it was really just a great opportunity to, again, go back and revisit all of the work that we had done up to the meeting last month. And so we really appreciate everybody's participation in those. So as I told you at the briefings, we, you know, the way we left the meeting, we were to do these workshops. And, you know, I think as we thought about the best way to approach that, we didn't really just want to come to the briefings and sit down at the table with you and say, what questions do you have? And so we came with a little bit of a presentation. We had a little bit of information, I think, to share with the board, if you'll recall. And probably the most valuable thing that we did is we really told almost a chronological story of how we put the program schedule together. And so you'll remember from the August meeting, we basically organized the schedule into subcommittees, and we talked to you about dates for each one of the projects. But maybe didn't tell the complete story and to how the program schedule got put together. And so at the briefings, we spent some time, we walked the board through chronologically how we assembled the schedule and kind of how the pieces fell into place. We used David's analogy of trying to fit a bunch of rocks into a jar, and we start with the big rocks and we fill the little rocks in around it. And so we kind of walked the board through that. And so I think that was very helpful for everybody. It stimulated a lot of conversation. The other thing I would say as I look back on those briefings, I really felt like I found myself and our team returning to a lot of things that we communicated to the board in August. And so I guess what I would say as I look back on that, I would say I don't know that we presented a lot of new information as much as we reiterated the things that we communicated to the board in August and the things that are communicated in the plan in terms of what the guiding principles were of the plan and how the things that inform the plan. So, you know, a lot of the things we talked about in August, you know, early movement, trying to get all the projects moving just as quickly as we can, being aggressive with the project schedule. We talked a little bit at the briefings about being thoughtful about how we develop the scopes for the project. So some of them we divided up. If you'll remember, we talked about, you know, if you were to go down through the program schedule and pick a specific phase out of the $55 million in sidewalk work, there's probably not a specific reason why, you know, phase 3B starts in the year that it does. But the reason that it's structured that way is because we've tried to put the program schedule together in a way that allows for participation. And so we found ourselves returning to that guiding principle. We talked a little bit, I think, about financial requirements, probably not in the same way that we did in August, but If you'll remember from the briefings, we walked the board through, what our funds available for obligation curve, our cash flow curve looked like, with the plan that we brought forward in August. And so we found ourselves returning to that, principle that's informed the plan. And then we talked a lot about what I will call other considerations. And so there's a big, long list here of other things that inform the plan. We talked at the briefings about a lot of the projects that are in the community subcommittee, and how those, the majority of them deal with human needs. And that as our board put this program schedule, or as our team put this program schedule together, it was really important to us that we started those projects just as quickly as possible. We talked about at the briefings just the public process and how projects take longer than people might otherwise think. And we gave the board some background into how we came up with the durations that we did. I think that, as I said at the briefings, we've gotten a lot of feedback from project advocates about it really takes this long to get a project done. And so we tried to give the board some information in terms of how we came up with the durations that are shown in the schedule. And so I found ourselves returning to that. We talked a little bit about organizational capacity. I mean, we talked about all of these things. And, the thing that I would say is, as I look at this list and I think about the briefings, I think these are a lot of the things that we talked about in August, honestly, if I were to go back and kind of study the information that we brought forward. So, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because the briefings, the format of them gave us an opportunity to have a conversation about some of these things. And so, again, what I would just drive home is that we found ourselves returning to a lot of what I will call fundamentals. So one of the things that I guess I would say that got this conversation started a little bit was the August meeting was, there was a lot of conversation about the youth centers. And, I think when we ended the board meeting in August, it became more of a conversation that we just need some time to study this a little bit more. But we felt as we were preparing for the briefings that we needed to come forward with a solution. And so we did present a possible alternative to the youth center schedule. And so we're going to spend some time here this afternoon walking the board through that again. I think that, in Tina Belchick's words from the August meeting, she asked us, is there a way to sharpen, or she asked the board, is there a way to sharpen our pencil? And I think we've made a really good attempt at possibly doing that. And so we want to bring that forward for the board's consideration and review. So this is the youth center schedule as it was presented in the implementation plan. And so you can see the 4 phases that we discussed in the August meeting. I've noted on the schedule the approximate dates that we are anticipating that the youth centers would be open. And so you can see the first phase opening in the fall of 26, and they go on thereafter, the last one opening in about August of 31. So I've included at the bottom of the slide our original funds available for obligation curve. So if you'll remember the 2 curves that you see on the slide, the gray one that's in the background was our first pass at this thing. We referred to that in the August presentation, but November of 2020 was really the first time that we took a stab at this financial model, and so we've provided that here. And then you can see the obligation curve that we've arrived at, the plan that we presented last month, and what it looks like. And so if you'll recall from our August meeting, we talked a little bit about how aggressive that we have been. You can see with our initial pass, we were sitting on a lot of cash. And as you can tell from the financial model that we arrived at, we have really moved a lot of things forward, almost to the point of we really can't speed anything up any more than what we have. So this is really where we started. So over the course of the last month, we have spent some time. We have developed what I will call is it's a possible alternative. It is an accelerated schedule. So at the top, you see the original plan. At the bottom, the adjusted schedule, which we might propose. And so you can see that we've moved, really not moved everything to the front of the plan, but we've sped each phase up. And so if you were to go sit down and compare the before schedule to the after schedule, you can see that we've sped each one of these up. So we've identified that here for the board, so you don't have to do the math. We've accelerated the first phase about 9 months, the second phase 14 months, 16 months, and you can see the last phase, we have finished construction almost 2 years in advance of what was proposed in the original schedule. And so we took this alternate schedule and we ran another financial model, as you might expect. And this is what it looks like. And so you can see again, the gray is the model that we ran with our first pass in November of 20. The light blue that you see there, that's the financial model that we presented in August to the board. And then in the green that you see, that is the impact of accelerating the youth center schedule as we've shown here this morning. And so you can see it has adjusted some of our funds available for obligation slightly. You know, the things that we look at as a team are largely the spots where we are getting close to zero, because at some point we run out of the ability to enter into contract with people. And so you can see, you know, there's two spots in particular that I'll point out. One is sometime in 2023. You can see that we have about $6.3 million available for obligation. You can see under the previous model that was about 10.8, and so we've used a bit of that, what I'll say is contingency. We've eaten into a little bit of that with this accelerated schedule. The same would be true sometime in 2025. You can see we were at about, I think that says 18.7 million. You can see that we're down to about 4 million. So we are obviously getting closer to that zero line, and as you know, with pay-as-you-go, we can't go beyond that, but I would say that the MAPS office, in terms of executing this plan, has a lot of opportunities to adjust things as necessary to make that cash flow work. The other thing I would say is not to forget that this is based off of Oklahoma City Finance's revenue projections, and those projections are historically very conservative. They do not include interest, and so I guess all of that to say this is a very conservative financial model, and it is likely that we will end up probably above what is implied by this slide. The great thing about the accelerated version of the youth center schedule that we've shown here, we would not be required to move any other projects back. One thing I don't think that I made clear at the board meeting in August, you know, we have continued to accelerate projects and have been as aggressive as we can with the plan. Obviously, there's a limit to how much we can do that. And I think when we sat down after the August meeting and we started thinking about how do we speed the youth centers up, our concern was that it might be at the risk of other projects. In other words, other projects might have to move back in order to allow us to do that. I think what we've arrived at is a great solution because, as Tina indicated, we have sharpened our pencil, we've sped these projects up, but it's not come at the cost of other projects. You know, one thing I mentioned in some of the briefings, there are a lot of other projects. Tina is very passionate about the youth in Oklahoma City, as she should be. There are a lot of other projects in the MAPS 4 program that also serve those at-risk youth. Some of these youth have family members that are justice involved. Some of them may have family members that need the resources provided by a mental health crisis center or a restoration center. Some of them may be involved in domestic abuse situations. So there are other projects. When you think about the youth of Oklahoma City, it's not just about the youth centers. It's also important that these other projects move forward as quickly as possible. And so one of the things I like about this alternative is that it allows us to do that without it being at the cost of those other very important projects. So we think it's a good solution. One other thing that's come up that I'll share with the board, it's just been in the last few days, we have had some recent conversations about the homelessness project. So, you know, what I would say, if you'll recall back to our conversation about the homelessness project, just recall for a minute, you know, this is a $50 million project to make a comprehensive effort to address homelessness in Oklahoma City. And so a lot of the conversations in the last few days have centered around the selection process. And so this is the portion of the implementation plan where that's discussed. And so this is the scope section. I don't have the exact page number. I probably should have included that. But this is how this is ADG's attempt at summarizing the scope of that project. So in the last few days, we've had some conversations. We have gathered that there's some concern about what that selection process might look like. And so, and specifically, that the selection process might involve a bid process or a best offer process, and we felt like it was appropriate to possibly go back and revisit this language. And so, one of the other things that we'd like to present to the board this morning as a possible amendment to the plan is some revision to this language. And so, you can see here the adjustments to the language that we are proposing. You know, the thing I would probably most specifically call out is the language that we're striking related to a competitive grant application process. And so we've struck that word, we've made some adjustments. We think that the revised language better aligns with what the intent of the project was and what was communicated in the resolution that was approved by council. And so we would like to propose that amendment as well for the board's consideration. So really just to wrap up here, I think I'm going to get done in about 10 minutes, so you guys will have to make lunch. But, you know, as we communicated to the board last month, we have assumed schedule adoption in August of 2021. Obviously, we have gone beyond that. It's September now, and we still need to get this thing through council. So I think if this thing moves forward quickly, I see no need for us to go back and completely revisit the schedule and make a 1 or 2 month adjustment. I think that we can quickly recover with the schedule that we have proposed. But it does necessitate that that time is of the essence and that we move forward as quickly as possible. So that's how I would characterize that. I mentioned this in some of the briefings with the board members, but you know, one of the things that we have returned to as a team time and time again, and you know, you have to understand when you put something like this together and you keep your arms wrapped around it for several months, and then you let it go and it's out in the world and everybody has, you know, input that they want to provide in terms of what adjustments might be made. You know, we've really, I think as a team, we've stood by the fact that we have prepared what we think is a really good plan. It's aggressive. It's allowing the projects to move forward just as quickly as possible, and it's balanced. Almost all of the projects are moving forward in some form or fashion. And so I think as I step back and look at the plan and the work that we've done, I think those are the two things that we're probably most proud about as a team. And so, you know, I would just return to that. I would remind the board of that. I know that as a board member, you probably get lots of phone calls and questions and emails about why is this way and why is that way. And so, you know, I guess what I would say is these are the hallmarks of this plan, and so I would just remind the board of that. I think those are some of the key strengths. 14 of 16 projects starting by the end of 2022. None of that has changed since the last time we visited. And I think I would say, as you do continue to get questions, and I'm sure that it's not over yet, but just return to these fundamentals, the ones that we mentioned before, the fact that we're being aggressive with the plan, we're addressing human needs as quickly as possible, we're structuring the program in a way that allows for participation. These are all things, these are hallmarks of the plan, and they're things that I think really speak to how thoughtful the plan is. And so I would just remind the board to return to those as you do get approached and as you are discussing the projects with people. So, so we have talked about a couple of modifications this afternoon. I think the plan that is in your packet, the implementation plan, is as it was presented in August. And so obviously we have proposed a couple of modifications. Those modifications are things that can be incorporated into the plan by amendment today. And so you as the board will have to deliberate that and decide on how to move forward, but those are things that we can address today. My understanding is if there was a motion by the board to amend the plan, the ADG team would, following your recommendation, we would make those amendments, and then as it is passed to council, it would appear to council with the amendments that you've approved. So, and really, with that, we're ready to move forward. So, you know, assuming that we receive recommendation from the board today, we would essentially go to council on September 14th, so just about 12 days away. So hopefully we are in a position that we can do that. We are excited to get these projects moving forward just as quickly as possible. And obviously we've got to get through this hurdle first. And so, so that is it. Thank you for your time today. I'd love to answer any questions that the board has. And if not, I'll take my seat.
Jason, thank you. We always appreciate your information. Any questions for Jason? Okay.
I have one, actually.
Uh-huh.
So Jason,
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I turned it on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Okay. So you are recommending an accelerated plan? Or,
Go ahead.
I know we looked at a few different scenarios in our meetings. And
Yes, ma'am. So at the briefings, we actually presented two options. And one of these options, so we got a lot of information or a lot of input after the August meeting. Mm-hmm. One of the alternatives that we looked at was, let's do all of them right now.
Gotcha.
And, you know, I think there's a lot of There's a lot of problems with that approach, and I communicated some of those to the board in the briefings. You know, there's primarily, I think that as a community, I think we need time to coalesce around an idea about what these youth centers look like. And that option A, if you'll remember from the briefings,
Okay,
I don't think
yes.
allows that.
Right, right.
The other big part of it is the fact that, you know, you have to remember our program schedule. It's just the brick and mortar part of this, and there's an operational side that's got to dovetail with it for the youth centers to be successful. And there was a lot of concern, I think, by our team that, you know, moving all 4 phases of the youth center to start in the fall of this year, it's going to make it a pretty heavy lift for whomever the operator might be. And so I guess what I would say is we had our suspicions that that was not a viable solution. And I think as we went through the briefings, I think we got a lot of support for that thought.
Yes.
And so because of that, we didn't present that as an option. And so the option that you're seeing today is really what we referred to as option B at the briefings.
Okay, and that one came, pretty much all of these groups, workshops saw that as an option?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess what I should clarify, and Chairwoman, you might make sure I'm saying this right. ADG cannot propose an amendment. We're presenting this as a possible alternative.
Correct.
The
Right.
board would have to make a motion to amend the plan.
Right. They're presenting us the information that would be the substance of an amendment if any board member chose to make that,
Right.
present that as an amendment.
I think I probably did not word that very well. I just wanted to make sure that the amended plan that you have shown us today didn't cause you any real concerns.
No, I think we wouldn't bring it to the board if we thought we had issues with it. So we're comfortable with we're glad that we were able to accelerate a little bit. I mean, I know it's probably not fast enough for some, but I think it's a vast improvement over what we presented in August. So.
Gotcha.
I think without impacting any other projects, it's about as aggressive as we can get.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Jason, I have one question. When we met with you, you talked about maybe there were some concerns about it with an accelerated plan, that you learned lessons along the way with the wellness centers, of what worked, what didn't work. So how does accelerating these youth centers go into play as far as if there's a mistake made on the first center, but you're already somewhere down the road with the second center, how does that going to work?
Yeah, there is a little bit of that. I mean, stretching them out as far as we did in the original plan obviously gives us the best opportunity to learn from, to leverage lessons learned. Lessons learned from phase 1, we can leverage them on phase 2 and so on and so forth. I think what you're getting at is we've accelerated that, and so we've already started design on phase 2 while we're in the middle of construction on phase 1, and so I think it does make that a bit more challenging, but I don't feel like they're accelerated to the point where we completely lose that. I think that they're still separated enough that we can make some course corrections along the way. And certainly the way that we have them, the option A that we reviewed, it would get rid of all of that opportunity because they would all be running in parallel with one another. I feel like with this modified version, we probably lose a little bit of an opportunity to do that, but I don't think it's gone. I still think there's some opportunities for us to leverage those lessons. Certainly as we look at phase 3, we will be finished with phase 1, and so there'll be plenty of opportunity, I think, to leverage lessons learned. I think the rub probably comes from phase 1 and phase 2, because phase 1 will be the first time that we walk through a youth center and the entire design process. I think that's where we run the chance of having a little bit more risk in terms of, missing opportunities to leverage those lessons. But the other thing I would say is we've put the schedule together in a way, we have 10 months of operator selection, development of an operating agreement. We have 10 months of programming and planning. And so our thought is we select an operator, and that operator is there with us to think about all the things that we don't want to miss during design and construction in terms of programming, figuring out site locations, figuring out priorities. And so I think having that person there at the table throughout the entire design process probably helps some of that as well.
Monique?
I do want to say that I really appreciated the meeting that we had. It answered a lot of my questions. And as we look at what you've brought to us today, I really do like the rewording on the homeless section, the homeless shelter section. And I think that will allow us to kind of move forward a little quicker on that area than previously noted. I truly appreciate you listening to the board, listening to our comments, and then working that into a updated, revised implementation plan. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet, Dr. Bruner, thank you.
Yes.
I just have one more question. This may be more for the board. I don't know how much this came up last meeting, but I do wonder about possible repercussions of moving up one project that, you know, I know there is need for it, but there are other projects that are just have as much need. And I guess I wonder about the optics of moving forward with one due to.
Right. Harry?
Yeah, I would like to respond specifically to that. One of the reasons I was in favor in the August meeting of considering an amendment was because the Coliseum project had been moved up. Now, I understand the reasons for that, and we talked about that in our group. It wasn't really technically moving up. It was that project got broken out into smaller projects, and so we were able to start them earlier.
Right.
But that actually did reflect a change in the original schedule that was talked about with our group in the first meeting. Okay. Well, if we're going to at least from a very technical position, we're moving that one up, then we ought to be able to consider a human needs project being moved up as well.
Right.
That's what said to me, we ought to consider this. And I think ADG has just done a great job of thinking outside, sharpening the pencil, thinking outside the box, whatever you want to say, to get a human need addressed that our board, Citizens Advisory Board, can be behind. And when we're questioned about things like a Coliseum, we can say, oh no, yeah, some things happen to make that possible, but let me tell you what we did to address human needs on the streets of Oklahoma City. And I think that puts me in a great position in my ward to address how all of this came about and how we've dealt with it in a responsible way.
Does that answer your question, Shay? Yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I don't have any questions. I would just like to go ahead and motion that we recommend approval of the MAPS 4 implementation plan with the adjustments to the youth center schedule.
Okay. So do we need to vote on the amendment first, I think?
Yeah, I think what we'd like is to vote on the amendment for the homelessness and an amendment for the youth centers, and then the plan as amended.
Okay, got it. So Jessica, are you moving for the?
I am moving solely for the implementation plan with the youth center.
For the youth center amendment?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Can I hop into one more comment before we move in that
absolutely.
direction? I think just echoing what Shay said, I think what we'd like to be able to do for at least the political optics is to be able to say that everything is moving forward as aggressively as possible, right? It turns out that the youth centers weren't moving forward as aggressively as possible. Can we, Jason, say with certainty that everything else is moving forward with as aggressively as possible, especially the human needs projects?
And I mean, I would just say from my perspective, looking at the financial model, when we're getting down to 4 million, that makes, you know, that's getting pretty skinny. But also keep in mind that some of these projects are going to stay on time, are going to be exactly what the timeline lays out, and some may not. Some may take longer on different pieces. So yeah, and I think that is part of what ADG does with us and for us through the duration of the next 10 years, is balancing and moving things forward and as quickly and aggressively as we can. So I think the answer is yes, from my perspective, from my looking at all of the financial models as well as the scheduling, the manpower, just the ability for the MAPS office and for ADG to execute these projects. That's my perspective. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Oh, I'm already behind.
This is to amend.
This is to amend, this is the amendment on the timing of the youth center projects, moving them up as presented by ADG. So we have a motion and a second. I'm not getting them. Oh, wait, there we go, sorry. Please cast your vote. Okay. Are you on presentation or computer?
So I have a question. Lisa, this is saying that it's recommending approval of the implementation plan.
No.
What? Okay. Okay, I just want everybody to be clear that what it says there, this is for the amendment, not the whole plan.
Right. Shay?
She abstained.
Oh, okay. Okay, the motion passes. So next is if there is a motion to accept the amended language related to the homelessness projects.
And just for clarification, Jessica her amendment was for the youth centers. It did not include the homeless.
Correct.
Okay, I
Correct.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we just need to take those separately in
Okay.
case anybody does or doesn't want to vote the same for each of those amendments. Okay, so,
I
yes.
move that we accept the language for the homeless shelter, the change in the language for the homeless shelters.
Okay, great. Please cast your votes. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. So now we will take up the implementation plan. So I'd hear a motion to accept the implementation plan with the two amendments that we've just passed. So we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Okay, thank you so much. The motion passes. Well done. Great job. And ADG, thank you so much. Okay, so now to item 5, discussion. Any discussion items to come before the board today? Okay. If not, do we have any citizens signed up for comment today? No? Okay. Any comments by staff or the board?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to thank everybody for slogging through with us for the last year. I know it's been very difficult, and appreciate it very much that we can finally get going. The bad news is that may be the easy part. So as we move along here, I'm really anxious to get started on these projects, as I'm sure each of you are. So this is a great day and a great milestone.
Well, and I would echo that. Thank you. This took a lot of your time, but I so admire and appreciate the diligence that you all put into listening and asking questions and wanting more information. I really very much appreciate that. And I think with that, we have great confidence in sending this plan to City Council for their consideration. So thank you so much. And Jason and your ADG team, please give them our deepest, sincere thanks for the many, many questions that they've answered in the hours and hours that you've put in on weekends and nights, and go buy something nice for your wife. Okay. She's earned it. Okay, so anything else? All right, so if we have no other items, we will be adjourned. Thank you. See you in October.